Hello, hello, Jordan Chariton live. Status coup in the United Corporations of America. 3 days before the election. 4 days before the election of the next puppet of president of the United States. Um, I got to tell you, happy to be joined by friend of the coup, Zeynab. And Zayna, I wish I had good enough acting skills to act excited about this election, but I'm not. I just want it all over. I would love for the election to end, there not to be another civil war, there not to be a Stop the Steal 2.0, which it seems Trump's already priming the pump for over the last week or so. And I'd like to get back to, actually, I'd like to take a break because I'm a little burnt out, as I'm sure you are.
Yes.
Uh, and then I'd like to get back to actually organizing for the first time, I think, in a while on the left. But before all that, unfortunately, I just wanted to, on a personal note, express my condolences. I know you lost your mom recently, and very important part of your life. So if you want to share anything about who she was, I know a lot of your badass nature came from her.
As she was pretty edgy, mom was. She wasn't super politically active, although she did have many political opinions, but she brought art to the world, and she was an artist. So she could do everything from sculpt, wood carving, painting, murals, crafts, crochet, jewelry. It was crazy. Literally anything she could think about, she could make. And thinking about her and all the different people she impacted, because we had a lot of community members come out. I think about how kind of like art impacts life and life impacts art, and how we still need those little treasures, those joys to steal away. But it is hard losing a parent, and she was young. She was only 67, so I think that's pretty young. But in Appalachia, we have a life expectancy 22 years younger than any other area in the country, and lost a lot of people here in the last couple years. My best friend passed away, and she was only 40. So, with that being said, a lot of people have gotten sick with pancreatitis in the area too. There may be ties to the water, which not a shocker. I'm in, southeastern Kentucky. But I miss her every day. But I feel like she's still with me. And, I know that sounds very cliche, but she raised me. She raised me. So she's perpetually in my head for the rest of my life. And I'm grateful for that. But thanks for mentioning her.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is a longer topic, but uh, Lord knows how many cancers and premature deaths have been caused by the water, air, and soil in this country.
Yeah.
And it's possible, um, given, Appalachia is one of the most poisoned communities in the country by corporate America and pollution. It's very possible that it was linked, but I'm
It's
sorry.
completely unexplained, I mean, is what they have told me, but there's been a lot of cases of pancreatitis here that they don't know what caused it, because
Yeah.
typically it's linked to other comorbidities such as, addiction to alcohol, which is a tragedy, or um, lifestyle choices or certain illnesses. But they said that she was one of the healthiest, people her age that they had seen come through.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, but they had hundreds of cases at the hospital here of pancreatitis specifically, not to scare anybody. But when you see things like that, I think it is important to note and to start looking into and to ask questions. Always ask questions. And one thing I will say is during this process, one of the things that I learned with mom being sick, she was sick for about a year. My brother and I were patient advocates for her. My brother works in the medical industry. He does surgical tech. So, and he's a surgical assistant. So we advocated very, very staunchly for her, despite being, fairly poor ourselves. But one of the things I thought about a lot was, what about And this is something Mom even mentioned to me when she was in the hospital this last year. What about people that don't have people that can advocate for them?
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking. That's another thing that I don't think is talked about enough. But it was sad. I saw a lot of people in the hospital with her that had no one with them. It broke my heart.
Yeah.
But it's really important to, I'm not trying to politicize what happened, but it is important to advocate for your loved ones. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to give them a hard time. Don't be afraid to confront when confrontation needs to happen, when it's your loved one and it's their health care. That's one of the things that I learned from it all.
Well, it's never the best thing to say other than I'm sorry for what you're going through, and I'm glad you got to spend time with her in the final weeks and months.
Me too, Jordan. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think you're the perfect person to have on today. I've been in the belly of the beast of the corporate media and now independent media, and you've been in the belly of the beast of the Democratic Party, trying to build a third party, and now maybe more homeless politically. So,
basically,
we'll get to. I don't really love predictions, but we'll get to our instincts of where this thing's going to go coming up. But I wanted to start, and also we're going to play some of the clips from our recent reporting trip. Myself, freelancer Jason. Jason Peters, we're just did between us both 10 days on the road in the swing states, not covering the polls, not asking who you're going to vote for, but actually asking, covering the issues that
some great
voters,
coverage. I've watched several of the videos that came out the last couple weeks. Really, really interesting stuff.
Brush off my shoulder. I think we covered more things in 10 days than the mainstream media covers in a year, frankly.
Yeah, that's honest, actually.
It's really true. It's really staggering how much we got done in 10 days. So we'll react to some of those. For those of you not paying attention, Tuesday, forget everyone else. You don't need to watch CNN. You don't need to watch Fox, New York Times, any other outlets. We will be on the ground across the country, across this land called the United Corporations of America. I'll be on the ground in Pennsylvania. Tina will be on the ground in Nevada. Frankly, everybody's saying it could come down to Pennsylvania, but who knows? I mean, Democrats have won the last couple elections, Nevada. But right now, Nevada seems to be tipping towards Trump. So for all we know, I could be on the ground in Pennsylvania, and everybody might be waiting on the West Coast to call a winner. Or this thing, we won't know the winner for days. Or we're headed for a civil war. I have no idea. But I wanted to start because I think if Harris loses, the core issue that she would have lost on is the genocide in Gaza. And I think Trump, he's an idiot in many ways, but politically he's not such an idiot. And he decided to go to Dearborn, Michigan today, the home of the largest Arab American population in the country. Also, there's a lot of Palestinian, there's a lot of Arab Americans, a lot of people with roots to Gaza and Palestine, also a lot of Lebanese Americans, not just in Dearborn, but all over Michigan. Trump decided to go there for a photo op. He showed up with, I guess, some of the Arab Americans in the state that have endorsed him, including the mayor of Hamtramck. Should be stated, they're in the Arab American community, tend to be a little bit more socially conservative, especially the older crowd. But Trump, it's kind of, it's not a secret what I think of Biden and Harris and what they're doing, but it's kind of gross for Trump, I believe, to go there and act like he gives a shit, considering he took $30 million from Sheldon Adelson when Sheldon Adelson was alive, who was basically, other than the Koch brothers, the biggest, billionaire corrupt fuck that all the Republicans went to kiss the ring of. He's dead now. And now his widow is giving Trump $100 million so far in this campaign. And for the $30 million that Trump got from Sheldon Adelson, he moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He did that for Sheldon Adelson and his $30 million. So if Trump wins, imagine what he's going to do for Miriam Adelson, giving him $100 million. But listen, I'm not going to tell people who to vote for. I've been clear. Vote your conscience. But let's get it straight. Trump visiting Dearborn today. I don't know if it can get worse than it is now because genocide is genocide. But Colin, if you could show the Washington Post article, I mean, it's been reported in recent days that Trump and Netanyahu have spoke recently, and Trump's message to Netanyahu was, "Do what you have to do," in terms of Gaza.
Right. And AIPAC has been hedging their bets. They're donating millions to both candidates.
Right.
And that's just a fact. So, it's to pretend that Trump isn't also going to be terrible on this issue, I think is an incorrect stance or inaccurate stance.
Right. And listen, I'm a white dude, so I'm not going to, I guess this wouldn't be mansplain. I'm not going to lecture anyone how to vote. I was in Dearborn a couple months ago and interviewed Arab Americans in Dearborn. And I think it's totally justified if they decide not to vote for Harris, if they decide to vote uncommitted, whatever they decide. You can't really say, well, it could get worse if your family is getting wiped out, if your homeland is basically neutered. I mean, it would take, without a massive mobilization, it's going to take 15 to 20 years to rebuild Gaza, and Israel will probably just knock it down again.
Estimates are even higher than that now. It's right. Crazy. Yeah.
But I just think this is such a Trump move to go there. It was basically a photo op, and act like he's going to do something different because he basically wanted Israel to be more aggressive and speed this up, whatever this is, because again, there is no real military solution to this. There's no eradicating Hamas, just like there was no eradicating Al Qaeda. It just became ISIS, and you can't erase hate. You cannot eradicate an idea, and we're giving them more ammunition to want to attack us and to want to attack Israel, America, because we're kind of killing whole generations of Arabs there under the guise, the bullshit guise of, defense. But I will say, I mean, we'll get to the broader election later. Listen, if I know any state, it's Michigan. I know the polls have shown Harris up modestly, but I think it's not just Arab Americans. It's a lot of young voters who they were already kind of leaving Biden before October 7th happened for a lot of reasons. But this, I think, for a lot of young people is kind of like their red line. And young people is basically what saved the Democratic Party in the midterms in 2022. The exit poll showed young, particularly 18 to 35, their strong numbers, largely because Roe versus Wade was overturned, helped avoid that red wave. I think those strong numbers, a lot of that might be going to Jill Stein, particularly in Michigan, among young people. Obviously, Arab Americans, either Jill Stein or voting uncommitted. And when you combine that in Michigan in particular with, I was in Detroit, I was very surprised. I mean, there is, even among older Black women, which is the bedrock of the Democratic Party. I met some folks who if you asked me before, I would have put down the little money I have. Kamala stans. They were considering voting for Trump because they're just disgusted and fed up with the Democratic Party. And then you have Black men in Detroit. Not all of them, but there's a sizable amount of them that are gravitating towards Trump for some reasons, because he commuted the sentence of Kwame Kilpatrick, former mayor of Detroit, was convicted of bribery, sentenced to 27 years, which a lot of Black people there think he was railroaded. So they like that Trump got him, took him out of jail. Some of them, as simple as they got a $2,000 check in 2020 and Trump's name was on it.
There's a lot of people that actually look at the COVID relief that they saw, even though a lot of it was Congress. The problem is that Biden rolled it all back, and people remember that. It's less, oh, Trump did this amazing thing for us. It's more Biden cut everything we had. Because even with some of the small business loans and things like that did actually help sole proprietorships and people that were barely making it work and gig workers. And then you have the $600 expansion on unemployment benefits. And you also had like you said, the $2,000 check. Biden gets in and then 4 months later, we all get a check in the mail, and then when we go to do our taxes, we find out that it's something that we have to pay back. It wasn't even explained to us that it was a credit that had to be paid back that we automatically got. So people, I'm no supporter of Trump. I'm just saying where the people are, people remember those things, and that's the tangible kind of things that impact their everyday lives that they're going to remember.
But as you know, because you were part of launching brand new Congress, Justice Democrats. You basically AOC basically recited your words because you wrote a lot of what her speeches. People, candidates, especially in the last days, they don't go places without a specific reason. There's a hierarchy of priorities. The fact that he went to Dearborn tells me his campaign has some internal numbers that show he's doing significantly better than before with black men, perhaps. He's probably getting crushed among women. That's countrywide. But he's doing he's doing better among independents, I believe, than perhaps 4 years ago. So they're just looking at the margins and they say, all right, it's really close. We're doing better among X, Y, and Z group. Let's go try. And even if we're not going to get them to vote for us, if we could get more of them not to vote for her or to vote third party. So I think the fact that he went to Dearborn instead of going to Wisconsin, instead of whatever he could have done instead in the swing states, shows that they think there's a strategic reason to do so, because he actually does have smart people this time running his campaign.
True, but it runs so much in contrary to the Madison Square Garden's crazy, bigoted, hateful, insane rally that they had.
Yeah. And by the way, the Madison Square Garden rally, there was zero strategic reason to do that. That was all just Trump's grandiosity and Trump's narcissism, because he always wanted to play Madison Square Garden. That was the whole thing. He wanted a big thing at Madison Square Garden because he's from New York. He wanted to do it in 2016, 2020. His campaign rightly told him that, this is stupid. You're not going to win New York. But obviously that was a horrible. And we just posted a video earlier today, by the way, the great John Farina, who we're probably going to have to pay his therapy bills after a while for all the crazy shit he has to expose himself to. He interviewed some Trump supporters outside of MSG, and boy, those were some doozies. But I just want to show, just to drill down, that Trump is not your friend either. Colin, let's play that clip. This was, I believe, the Uncommitted group has a video that they played to remind people about Trump and his record on Palestine.
The devastation experienced in Gaza over the past year is unimaginable. And under Trump's Project 2025, the worst may still be ahead. Project 2025 calls for the elimination of all humanitarian aid to the West Bank and Gaza. And here in the US, Trump plans to silence anyone who stands up for Palestinian rights. The push for Palestinian human rights will never be easy, but with a second Trump presidency, both civilians in Palestine and our anti-war movement here in our country will suffer.
So to be clear, within that Uncommitted group, who obviously made history, they got 100,000 people, over 100,000 people in Michigan to vote uncommitted during the primaries. There's even a split within them that I forget his name, but he's saying vote against Trump, meaning vote for Harris. There's other leaders in Uncommitted who are not voting for Harris. So it's not like they're not all on the same page. Obviously, that ad was...
It fractures around the lines of who is within... Mostly from what I've discovered, it fractures along the lines with who is within the Democratic Party and believes in sort of that Justice Democrats sort of, because they are, I mean, Waleed Sahed, who used to be in one of the communications directors for Justice Democrats, is leading the messaging for Uncommitted. And so he's very much from the beginning was about kind of the reformist stance, and then many of the others that are taking that stance are people within the Democratic Party that feel more along the lines of, we can reform it, we can change it. It was more of a pressure campaign against Harris, but since it's not happening, then their thoughts are, we support our party is more kind of anything. There's a little bit of strategy weaved in there, but it's definitely a partisan decision, when more on the ground organizers that were sort of outside of the Democratic Party beltway are like, making the decision to vote for anyone who supports this genocide, it will have lasting impacts. So that's sort of,
Right.
I think, where the gulf split apart.
Yeah. So I don't really think you could, I don't want to compare it to Occupy, which was like a leaderless movement, which I think, well, it was great in some ways, but sometimes you do need leaders. In this case, I don't think uncommitted. Yeah. There's different leaders with different views. Some are for voting against Trump, meaning vote for Harris. Some are saying absolutely not. Some branched off and now are in abandon Harris, which is a lot more aggressive than uncommitted. But as we'll get to the broader electoral ramifications in a bit, because Michigan, everyone's saying Pennsylvania might be the state. I happen to think it might be Michigan that makes a difference. But in Dearborn, in addition to Trump insulting the intelligence of Arab Americans by making it seem like he cares, boy, there's a couple things that scare me. John Bolton, his mustache, him speaking, him in a position of power. Other things that scare me, Hillary Clinton in a position of power. A third thing that scares me is RFK Jr. in a position of power in the health department. Not that our health department is great, not that there's not a lot of corruption in the health department, the EPA, the CDC, but RFK, I mean, I'm not trying to be funny. Maybe the brainworm did something. Even his friends say, yeah, that brainworm he had, he went off a little bit after that. Because at this Dearborn photo op, apparently RFK Jr. is with Trump. And Trump was asked about rumors that RFK Jr. will have a big role in his White House. Let's take a look at what Trump said.
Which one was that?
That is Trump on RFK Jr.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. You said last night, President Trump, you said last night you would essentially let Robert F. Kennedy Jr. do whatever he wants with health care. What
he's going to have a big role in health care.
HHS, maybe?
We just left. In fact, I think he might be here.
He's right behind.
He's right here.
You're comfortable with his
Will
views
he run
on, You're comfortable
HHS?
with his views on vaccines, Mr. President?
We'll be talking about a lot of things, but he's going to have a big role in health care, a very big role.
Is it HHS, maybe?
He knows it better than anybody. He's got some views that I happen to agree with very strongly, and I have for a long time. I mean, for years, you and I would we'll be seeing it as a...
What about his views on vaccine and maybe a position at
all
HHS?
of these things will be talked about.
This meeting is...
I have a lot to say there, Zeynab, but I'll start with you because I think RFK Jr., first of all, putting aside all the conspiracy theories and whatnot, it's very clear that, I mean, basically Trump was the highest bidder. That's why RFK dropped out and endorsed Trump. It wasn't for some principled stand. It wasn't because RFK thinks Trump is going to make America healthy again. The reporting's pretty straightforward that Trump offered him more. You could say, hey, Kamala should have offered him something. In this case, I credit her for not because I think he's a nut job. I also think, based on other reports, I think there's a lot underneath the hood as far as his treatment of women. More might come out about that. But your thoughts? This could be just Trump making a deal and not planning on following up. He does that all the time. Or it also could be RFK has stroked Trump's ego enough that Trump's just going to appoint him somewhere where he has no business being.
Well, RFK is a walking contradiction when it comes to healthcare in a lot of ways, because he doesn't support Medicare for all, right? He's sort of a libertarian when it comes to privatize. He supports privatized healthcare, but at the same time, he can advocate against corporate overreach. He's done that. He's advocated that things like patents should be opened up to the public if they were paid for. R&D was paid for with our tax dollars, which happens a lot. We pay for research and development of patents for medications. Insulin's a great example. That was the research that led to insulin was paid for by our tax dollars. And yet, we saw corporations run roughshod with the pricing and, basically create a monopoly around it. So he's for demonopolization, but at the same time, he's against Medicare for all. And for me, it's a bit personal with RFK Jr. in a way, because I am an autistic person. I have autism, or I am autistic, and so is my daughter. So when he talks about, I do believe that he did a lot of damage in the early 2000s peddling myths about autism that is still sticking to this day, and vaccines. It's fine to question, I think, and I think that it's healthy to question and research, but everything he was basing his assessments on were all bunk science. And so he's advocated for things like eugenics in the womb of children with autism, which I think is absolutely abhorrent. So I think it's dangerous in that way, because he's all over the map, right? He's not consistent. I like some of his anti-corporate views, but he has views that are completely unhinged when it comes to healthcare. And I mean, that's one of his bellwether stances, right? So I go back to that one, even though that was a while ago, because that's sort of where he made his name and his mark in culture in the early 2000s.
I think RFK Jr., first of all, I want to start with the positive, and I don't think there is any, but I also want to at least give him somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. This is me playing human psychology, okay? His uncle was assassinated by the U.S. government. I'm not going to say anything else because YouTube still throws people off for such talk. But he's right to have a conspiratorial mind, because his uncle was the victim of a pretty clear, if you've looked into what happened with JFK enough, and I've read a lot of books and a lot of documentaries, and it's pretty cut and dry what happened with his uncle. Then you have his father. Another doesn't seem like it was a lone gunman or a random Sirhan. Okay, so he's come from tragedy, and I would have a pretty conspiratorial mind if those things that actually were conspiracies against my uncle and father, I would have a conspiratorial mind as well. But I think RFK Jr. is the perfect dictionary definition of conflating righteous mistrust and anger at the government, meaning I think he's right that about regulatory capture. I mean, I've broken story after story that the EPA is basically corrupt in Flint, in East Palestine, other places. I think he's right that our agencies have been purchased by lobbyists, by special interests. There's a revolving door where EPA heads and CDC heads and FDA heads, they go work in private companies that those private interests then go run these agencies. But
yeah, he's right about chemicals in our food, our water, our air. All of that is correct. I mean, he's right.
But you have to be able to separate. You have to be able to separate and not conflate understandable distrust with the government with a pox on all expertise, science, and data. That's where I believe RFK Jr. and his ilk, which has unfortunately just become a long, nauseating lines of podcasters pretending to be experts, and we could name a few. Jimmy Dore. You can't conflate understandable distrust with the government with, hey, we're all scientists are corrupt and full of shit and purchased and bought off and data. If you're a leftist, not long ago we were the ones arguing 99% of the scientists say the climate is on fire and climate change is real. We were arguing that. And some of those same leftists are now saying, well, all of them are lying and they're all paid off and they're all purchased. So the bottom line is he has pushed things, and I don't, I might trigger some people in the audience, and some, anti-vax, whatever you are, might unsubscribe. Goodbye if you're such a snowflake that you can't listen to this. But the bottom line is he does not have the expertise. And he also, his answer to everything is basically prove a negative. I mean, interview after interview I've seen with him, when people point out that the overwhelming amount of research, data, science have shown vaccines are largely safe. Of course, there are, there's always going to be isolated incidents, small sample groups, maybe people who had other issues where vaccine triggered those issues. He says he then challenges you. Well, have you read this study? Have you read that study? If we learned anything during COVID, you could find a study anywhere that will say anything to prove whatever point you want. There's a study out there for every narrative and every point. But I mean, 5G causes cancer, giving certain medicine to boys makes them gay. I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't want them anywhere near public health. And there are problems with the CDC, and there are problems with the EPA. But
yeah, the turning the frogs gay, people forget that didn't just come from Alex Jones. That also came from RFK Jr. back in the day.
Right. So I think Trump just says what he needs to say to get him through the hour or a day. I think he makes many deals that he's fine to break. I very much doubt RFK Jr. would be confirmed in a Senate hearing to be the head of like Health and Human Services, but he could have some type of a job that you don't need to be confirmed that has considerable power. And there's a difference between, okay, let's not shut down the asking of questions and empowering somebody who asks a lot of questions that are based on conspiratorial thinking and bullshit. And by the way, let's also point out, which, the RFK stands of the world like to leave out, this man has made a lot of money off of these conspiracy theories. His Children's Defense Fund is making bank, especially in the COVID era, off of his vaccine stuff and moving on to, 5G gives you cancer and other things. So look into the Children's Defense Fund. They are making a shit ton of money off of his making America healthy again. So I think that's kind of, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, the impacts that they had in Africa just a few years ago, I guess about 7 or 8 years ago, when in a few different countries, and I believe the Sudan was one of these countries, where they were peddling that yellow fever vaccines, mythologies about yellow fever vaccines, and it ended up tens of thousands of people died because they refused to get vaccinated. Exactly. And there, the only protection against yellow fever was the vaccine. So it spiked up extraordinarily high. Children's Defense Fund pulls out. But at that point, another regime takes over, and all these people have died. And that's the kind of irresponsibility with spreading misinformation. Now, I'm not saying that they purposefully killed people. I can't make that claim. But what I can say unequivocally is that their messaging and the push there did have an impact, and thousands of people died believing that the yellow fever vaccine would harm their children.
Right. And by the way, if RFK Jr. is such a champion of making America healthy again, well, that's kind of at odds with the man who said, I'm also a champion of free market capitalism, which he's on tape saying. Because part of making America healthy again, RFK Jr., why don't we lead with this? The federal minimum wage is $7.25. There's a 40-year inflation called gentrification. Look it up, i.e. economic terrorism, which is making housing unaffordable, childcare unaffordable. There's a domino effect with gentrification. So families, low-income families, that a lot of single mothers or working parents, they could only really afford fast food for their kids. They can't afford nutritious farm-to-table organic food for their kids. People are working like slaves in this country, so they can't afford time to exercise and go to the gym. So there's a lot of economic oppression and corruption leading to the 40-year bank robbery, that red line with all the money going to the top 1%, i.e. Trump and RFK. Well, part of that is it's hard to be healthy if you can't afford to eat well, exercise, and you live under chronic stress due to, can I put food on the table? And Trump's answer for that is, let's deregulate more, drill baby drill, and we'll give more tax breaks. Not that Harris is just offering more neoliberal crumbs too. But the point is
basically the same of all those policies.
Right.
Which is really
but the point is he doesn't seem to connect those dots. Part of the reason America's not healthy is economically the masses. I mean, the stats are unbelievable. 64% of people living paycheck to paycheck. 45%, I think it was, don't have $400 for an emergency. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying, again, I'm not here to tell you how to vote, but I will tell you personally, I don't want RFK anywhere near. I don't want RFK running my lemonade stand, much less healthcare in America. So be warned.
It's a scary prospect.
It
Dude's
certainly
not
is.
going to be. He might be anti-corporation, but he's not going to be anywhere close to something like a Medicare for all or universal health care. Or.
And by the way, for you Trumpers out there that might be watching, let's remember, Trump's the one who did Operation Warp Speed and the vaccines. If we had a lockdown in America, which we actually didn't, I love these people. It was lockdowns. I was in New York City. There was no lockdown. Everybody could walk around. People were still on the subways and the buses during the worst of COVID. You want a lot like Italy had lockdowns. You couldn't leave your apartment. There were schedules to go get groceries. We didn't have actual lockdowns in this country. Were people affected? Were kids affected by not being in school? Yes, there's valid negatives of the worst of COVID, but there was no lockdown. But Trump was the one who did all those things. Somehow they forget that. So RFK, your boy Trump is the one that pushed the vaccine. Your boy Trump is the one who pushed the lockdowns, yada, yada, yada.
They were protesting Trump. When RFK first started protesting, they were protesting during the Trump administration. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was before the election. Right. I think that's fascinating.
Before we move on, shout outs. New Status Coup member. Exciting. Welcome, new member. Did I get this? Hold on. Why do I keep losing the chat column? Mason signed up as a new Status Coup member. We also have
Pamela.
Oh, private chat. I'm missing it. Pamela, $10. Thank you, Jordan. Samuel, $100 donation. Jordan, what you do is necessary. John, you as well. 100%. You are the voice of the people. Thank you. Don't forget Zeynab. She does a lot of great stuff too. Reminder, I put out an email 2 weeks ago, Zeynab. I don't know if you saw it, but I put out the truth. I said, listen, we can't go at this pace anymore. I've been doing the job of 6 people for 6 years. Colin does the job that typically an outlet would have 3 or 4 people doing, between the editing, the graphics, tech stuff, promotion, and a lot of administrative stuff. So we need help. We need to be able to hire more people. I need another reporter. I need a producer. I needed an administrative person. So you're getting flooded with fundraising emails from politicians and other media outlets. Most of those other media outlets asking you for money, sit on their bums in a studio and bloviate at their assholes. Even the ones I like. We're actually out there, and it costs a lot of money. As I told you at the beginning of the show, I'm going to be on the ground in Pennsylvania. Tina's going to be on the ground in Nevada for a coast-to-coast, across-the-country election day and night. We'll both be live on Status Coup. I'll be in critical swing state, Pennsylvania. She'll be in critical swing state, Nevada. This costs money. Got to pay Tina. Got to pay her cameraman. Got to pay John. Got to pay hotels, food, all of that. We just got back from a 10-day, 3-state reporting trip that cost us, I think, over $5,000. And trust me, we didn't make $5,000. We lost money. So if you want us to be able to continue doing this, but more importantly, we need help. We need to hire more people. So if actual living, breathing, independent, keyword, independent. Some people say they're independent and then they get $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg. Others say they're independent and they're actually independent. Just saying.
Just saying. A random person.
Yeah. So if you want independent on the ground journalism, we cannot, I can't print money like the Federal Reserve. I don't have a money tree. I need you. StatusCoup.com/join. Sign up before the holidays. Before you're drained of money, sign up today. StatusCoup.com/join. $5 a month is all I need. That's 16 cents a day. Sign up, and we're going to do our members call right after the election. Hopefully, all joking aside, there isn't a Stop the Steal 2.0. There isn't another standoff. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have another one. But hopefully things will calm down and we'll be able to do a members call after the election.
Well, that's half the price of a cup of coffee at a coffee shop these days.
Do you know, can I tell you something? My jaw almost dropped. I was on the road, and I love my union brothers and sisters at Starbucks. But let's be honest, your coffee's overpriced, and most of it's puff and fluff. I went to a Starbucks. I was very tired. John and I had been driving, I think, 5 hours that day on top of 3 interviews. So I went to a Starbucks and I got the venti, which is like the large one. Whatever I think it was the pecan latte. I don't know, something fancy. It probably had way too many calories. Do you know how much a venti pecan crunch latte was?
Close to $11, I bet.
Not that bad. $7.50.
That's high. Well, I always get a double shot.
I thought I said, is that a mistake? I said no. I said $7.50. I remember growing up, my mom said to me, do you know how hard it is to make $5? Do you know how hard it is? Because I said something spoiled or something like that. You know how hard I worked to make $5? And a fucking pecan latte was $7.50. So anyway, that's a kind of I'm going off on tangents, but the prices are too damn high, and providing this reporting costs a lot of money. And we do not have Miriam Adelson showering us with money. We don't have the living Koch brothers showering us with money. David Brock, whatever fucking miscreants are paying off Kamala and Trump this time. All our funding comes from you. And the beautiful thing about
gas alone is expensive. Even if you
Yes.
slept in your car and skipped the hotel rooms, you still have to have gas to get there, and that's no small
John and
amount.
I drove from New York to Wisconsin back and forth. It's about 650 miles back and forth. Gas probably cost us alone $300 to $400. No, $500, $600. Hotels between 3 states were probably another $600, $700. So anyway, listen, it's up to you. If you want Status Coup to continue, you got to pay for it. StatusCoup.com/join. Become a member for $5 a month. That's all I ask. All right, let's move on. Zeynab,
OCB said 50 more likes and I'll give out free memberships.
yeah, what's with that,
Hit
by
that
the way?
like button,
I'm
guys.
live.
Thanks, CB.
I'm live, and we only have 140 likes. Come on, folks. Let's get going. We need more likes, share this stream, all that. So,
CB will get you guys some memberships. That's awesome.
and
Thank
CB,
you.
thank you for the gifted 20 memberships yesterday. It was amazing. So let's get into the actual election. Listen, there's enough prognosticating and predictions and whatever. I really think it's a coin flip. My I guess you could say gut, but best guess. At this point, I think Harris is going to very narrowly win. The reason I think that is a couple things I saw. Number one, Colin, this is under the election section. This tweet I saw, one thing is clear, 2024 is not a 2016 redux, with voter enthusiasm among Democrats stronger than it has been in nearly 20 years. Now, that's important because obviously voter enthusiasm is a mark of bringing out your base. But there's a good part of the, quote, Democratic base that ain't going to vote. Young people, because of the Gaza issue, Arab Americans, we already went through Michigan. So that's why I think it's gross doing her little victory tour with Liz Cheney. You might as well go around with Lucifer. I don't agree with Trump saying, shoot her in the face or whatever he said yesterday, which was obscene. But
What? Oh my God.
Trump said, maybe Liz Cheney needs to be on the firing line of the war she starts. I'm no fan of Liz Cheney, but I'm also not a fan of just directly stoking violence against politicians we don't like. However, I also think that at the end of the day, with elections like this, I mean, we could all be wrong. He could win in a landslide or she could win in a landslide. But based on all the polls, I think it's incredibly close. So when you have close elections like this, it comes down to very little things. And I happen to think between the voter enthusiasm, it seems that in early voting in a lot of these critical states, more women have voted than men. That doesn't mean that a shit ton more men might come out on election day to kind of even that out.
Women do tend to vote more in early voting for some reason. Like statistical margins are almost 2 to 1 on women over men coming out in early voting. I'm not sure why, but a lot more fellas come out on the day of the election, statistically, historically.
And the last thing I'll say, I think these things kind of come down to small things on the margins. I think it really did not help Trump that this comedian basically shit on Puerto Rico at MSG. For whatever reason, well, no, Philadelphia in particular has a pretty big Puerto Rican community. There's almost 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. So if the vote could come down to, I don't know, 5 to 10,000 votes in any given state, Pennsylvania, and you had a huge fascist rally at MSG shitting on Puerto Rico, and you didn't really denounce it, that could make a difference. From what I saw in Wisconsin, it seems that Harris is doing better among Black people in Wisconsin than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. Might have something to do with the fact that she's actually going there as opposed to Hillary Clinton, who forgot to go to Wisconsin. But I think it's really, to me, I think it's a coin flip. I think if she wins, I do think the defining thing would be she was able to get a shit ton of women out there over the abortion issue, which obviously helped the Democrats in 2022. I think she was able to get enough of Gen Z out with all the DNCs catering to TikTok people. And sadly, she sucked enough Republicans off to get them to come to her. But that's not a strong feeling. I don't feel strong about it. In Michigan, when I was there, I felt she was going to lose. But I think there's a strong chance she wins Wisconsin. I think there's a decent chance she wins Pennsylvania. Michigan, I think she has a shot to lose. But I also think there's a chance she could pick off North Carolina or one of those. I know you disagree with me.
Oh yeah, I think that North Carolina is probably a wash now when it was leaning more blue, because it's been historically a Democratic Party stronghold before the 50-state strategy was abandoned, which I covered on Status Coup a few months ago. But I disagree because I feel that historically speaking, and now pollsters have said that they have adjusted for this, but we didn't really see it in the midterms this year, the adjustment, because the assessment was that Democrats were going to win by a landslide. That did not happen. There were a lot of races that were set to potentially win that they didn't. And we didn't see the blue wave that everyone was saying that all of the polls were showing was going to happen, didn't happen in the midterms at all. And I think that with our polling, it's very unclear. I think that early voting numbers gives us a little bit of a better indicator. But again, early voting tends to lean more Democrat almost always across the board. So it's going to be hard to know. And also, I think that we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple days, because what a person remembers is the last thing that they heard before they go into the voting booth. Honestly, they're going to remember things from the past. I'm not saying that people are stupid by any means, but one of the things that's going to drive you is the last thing that made you angry or made you hopeful or made you feel a certain way a lot of the times for voters. I think that Trump is going to pull out ahead by more than what we think because of polling numbers, because of the economy right now under Biden. And whether accurate or not, there are assessments that people make when a president is in office and their lives have gotten harder. And I think that that's going to impact the polls when people go out. I also feel like, and I know people are going to laugh about this because Trump is very undigestible as well to most of us, right? But to the average person who only watches him occasionally, maybe they got a couple clips from Joe Rogan this year, or they might think, he's evened out a little bit. It's not as crazy, because not everyone is as dialed in as we are. There's going to be millions of Americans that never know that the Madison Square Gardens rally happened or what was said there. Sadly, that's just the reality. So I do think that there's a potentiality that he pulls through by wider margins, because already the polling is on shaky grounds and they're already seeing him make an upswing, like you said, in states like Pennsylvania, Nevada, even Virginia, potentially. So in some of these places that used to be that they're calling now swing states this year. It's so crazy how swing states just change every election cycle. Where we're seeing Kamala pull ahead, but they could be completely wrong about swing states too, because Florida wasn't supposed to be up in the air in 2000, and yet it was, and we didn't know what was happening with it, and that was a crazy election. And then all of a sudden, Florida's not strongly blue, and it's right on the line, and that surprised everybody. Ohio, when it shifted blue, people were like, "What's going on? It's been red for a few years. How did it shift blue all of a sudden?" So I don't know. I think just from my assessment of where we are, that there's a potentiality that Trump wins. I think there is more enthusiasm among the Democratic Party base. I think that that's accurate, but I think the Democratic Party base has shrunk considerably, and that's what worried me.
I think it shrunk based on a lot of young voters. I think a lot of young voters, not just the Arab American issue, but got to remember, and by the way, big shout out, CB, 20 memberships gifted after yesterday's 20 memberships. I'm not good at math, but I think you've gifted 40 memberships over the last 2 days. CB, I'm grateful, eternally grateful. That makes a huge difference. You'd be surprised if we could get like 1,000 to 2,000 more paid members, we'd be in a much better position. Not that 40 is 1,000, but it's getting there. So thank you so much. And the way it works is it's random. So if you're in the chat, you'll see you were randomly gifted a membership. And as a Status Coup member, you'll get access to our monthly members calls, which is through a program like Zoom. I take your questions, comments, concerns. We do behind the scenes videos for members. So there's a lot of great perks in addition to supporting us. I'll also say, I think a lot of people in general, and I'm not trying to exclude our older viewers, but I'm focusing on younger people because they actually made a big difference in 2020 and 2022 for Democrats. But I think a lot of younger people, not that they've been red pilled, but I think a lot of younger people either are going to vote third party or not vote because they were told 2020 is the most important election of your lifetime. We need to stop this man. But they were also told if we get rid of him, we're going to build back better. We're going to raise the minimum wage.
Nothing will fundamentally change, but you still have to come out and vote for me.
Well, no, Wall Street was told that, but yes, you're right. But they were fed some concrete things like a $15 minimum wage, public options, some student loan cancellations, $2,000 checks. And he abandoned all of those things very quickly. And the thing that has surprised me about Kamala's campaign is how little she's actually running on economically. And some will say, Jordan, that's unfair. She's offered specific proposals. Right. But whether you liked Bernie Sanders or not, his proposals were bold. They were not like skimming around the edges, kind of neoliberal tax credits. It was universal health care. It was free public college. It was a Green New Deal. She's offering things that, if you're a policy nerd, yes, will it help some people? Of course. But it's not transformational change. She's not offering big, bold things at a time when people want to hear big, bold things. Costs have been up for many years. Whether it's all Biden's fault or not, like Zeynab said, it doesn't really matter what the context is. People just see, well, prices were lower under that guy, Trump, and they're higher under Biden and Kamala. Whether it's completely their fault or not, it's not. These are global trends. But there are things Biden could have done to force grocery stores, oil companies, lower the prices. He didn't because he's in their pocket, just like Trump is. So I think she has, most people that are not political diehards, if you ask them, they don't know what she is running on. They don't know what she would do. Not because she hasn't expressed some policies, but because they're not bold. Listen, a $25,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers, it's nice, but how great is that if the prices of homes have skyrocketed and interest rates are like 5, 6, 7%?
Who has $25,000 most of the time to be able to, for first-time home buyers, to be able to save up that $25,000? That means that you already have to have it, and then you get it back. That means that you would have had to pay that in, and then you get it back on your taxes. And not that many people pay in $25,000 annually that are poor. So, I would say middle class, that helps to a certain extent. But at the same time, it's a Band-Aid. She's not giving a federal grant. They're not a grant. It's a credit.
And also the $6,000 child tax credit, that's a great thing. The problem is, what are we going to get? Another year tax credit if it even passes? All right, so you're going to cut poverty in half, as they say, for a year until it expires, and you don't fight for it like Biden. I mean,
that
the list.
Those two policies, by the way, are both in Project 2025. If you guys were wondering, they are both Heritage Foundation policy. The Heritage Foundation was going to give the $6,000 tax credit in Project 2025 in order to incentivize having babies because of our depopulation, that the right wing always talks about. And the $25,000 tax credit was to promote nuclear families within the United States. So both of those are Heritage Foundation. If anybody was wondering, Project 2025
the point is,
policies.
I don't know who's advising her. Probably the donors she's depending on. People don't need more tax credits. They need the minimum wage raised. Yeah. People don't need more tax credits. They need, frankly, universal child care, which is one of the biggest expenses out there. And a lot of other countries have. People need, canceling medical debt was a good start, and that has not, by the way, been enacted. That, there's been some things Biden has done for that, but people need, our healthcare, honestly, is equal, if not worse, than Obamacare 14 years ago. She's not proposing anything new on healthcare. So it's all just, we have to save Obamacare. We've been hearing this 4 election cycles in a row now. She's not offering anything bold. So I think if she loses, it's because she's running Hillary Clinton's campaign in terms of she's going more aggressively against Republicans than Hillary Clinton did. And Hillary Clinton ran aggressively to try to get Republicans. She has to, because she made a determination that Biden made. And in her defense, there wasn't really enough time to reverse it. She made a determination. I don't want to lose the donors. The donors are the rich, wealthy people who are Zionists and happen to be Jewish. I'm Jewish. I'm saying that. It's just follow the money. The biggest donor of the Democratic Party is Haim Saban. His net worth is $3 billion. He's an ardent Zionist. Why do you think they wouldn't let a Palestinian American speak at the DNC? Look at
you got some high roller Christian Zionists too throwing money up in the Democratic Party as well.
There you go. But David Plouffe and the people running her campaign probably said, we've lost X amount of the pot here, young people, Arab Americans. We have to try and get never Trumpers. We have to get, moderate Republicans. Whether that will work or not, I don't know. If it does, that scares the shit out of me, because that gives license to the Democratic Party to move further right. If they could say, look, we could make these Republicans permanent Democrats. Let's just, do tax cuts for wealthy people and, sprinkle in some stuff for the peasants. But I personally think it's a coin flip, but I do see that Republicans are very energized also. And I think at the end of the day, elections like this, they come down to small margins. Trump got 8%, I believe, of the black vote in 2020. What if he gets 12% this time? Trump got
polling as 12 to 15%. Yeah. That's a huge number. That's why you have Obama, President Obama coming out scolding black men, and Michelle, about, their. One of the things that I do think is going to hurt the Democratic Party this time around, is going to hurt Kamala's campaign, is so much messaging from actual members of the Democratic Party, from the press, from pundits, that are scolding voters. So instead of addressing the voters' concerns, especially as something as horrific as the mass atrocities, war crimes, and genocide in Gaza, or the poverty and pollution at home, things like you said, needing a living income, federal jobs guarantee, our water to be cleaned, and to discontinue the poisoning of our water. They're not addressing these issues that are impacting our everyday lives, but yet they're scolding voters who criticize that, or who have problems, and have gone as far as to, Lawrence O'Donnell went as far as to, and I saw this on Punch Up Pod, Layla and Pat were talking about this, has gone as far as to scold voters, saying that whatever Trump does, if you vote third party, or you don't vote for Kamala Harris, means that you're responsible. You, as the individual, not the Democratic Party, not for them not earning the votes, but you as the individual are responsible for anything that Trump does.
That's funny because he was the same guy. Remember that clip where he said the only way to get the Democratic Party to listen to you is to make them actually believe you won't vote for them.
Yep. He knows. He knows he's full of it because he admitted that to us, 15 years ago. But the scolding isn't going to work. It's a mass campaign, a basket of deplorables. That's what's happening. And it's leftists that they're attacking. It's the same thing they did to Bernie Sanders supporters. It's the same thing they did, the basket of deplorables against. And a lot of those people were independent that they were talking about, not just, Republican supporters, because she was talking about how independents in that same interview, how independents have to vote for her, or basically they're misogynist. People don't remember that part as much as the deplorables, but she basically said that any independents that don't vote for me, it's rooted in misogyny.
Right.
So I think that this campaign turns a lot of people off. I think that it does. And it's not just microcosms on Twitter. It's people at workplaces. It's them hearing it on the news. It's hearing it from family members and from friends, because that's what's getting messaged. That's the word. The word is, if you don't vote Democrat, they owe the vote. They're owed the vote because Trump is so horrible. But it's like you said, one other thing, and then I'll shut up. But the when you just mentioned a really good point, because if something like genocide isn't a red line, if there's no red lines, and the Democratic Party is moving so far to the right now that they have a similar platform to 2012 Republicans, they really do. Their platform parallels. As long as they know that someone is as evil as Trump, he's horrible. But if they have someone that is horrible, if they have someone that is an extremist running in the Republican Party, then it benefits them because they can keep marching toward the right, which their donors like. And then they can still at the same time say, hey, this person will do a genocide worse. You have to vote for me, even though I'm also responsible for mass atrocities. That's a bad place to be. That scares me. And in that way, I see Kamala as a bit of an accelerationist, because, if she gets elected, people are going to go back to brunch. And then it's going to signal the next 4 years, they need to help the Republicans find another Trump to run.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll be back in the same place, continually being told, this is the most important election of our lifetime. And I know, Jordan, I know, Zaina, it's not a good option, but we got to stop, Ron DeSantis. We got to stop Tom Cotton. We got to stop Don Trump Jr.
Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, whoever it is. So we'll see. I mean, it's clicky to make predictions. I don't really have a gut instinct on this one. I think that when I was on the road, my gut instinct was Trump was going to win Michigan. Harris was going to win Wisconsin. Harris was going to win Pennsylvania. But some things have happened since then that I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you could finish out your thought, but what were some of the things that stuck out the most to you that people talked about, maybe things that were more important to them that really stuck out to you? Did you see any patterns out there talking with folks, and anything that crossed partisan lines?
I think the main thing that stuck out to me was exhaustion. People are exhausted, not just physically, just mentally, spiritually, and they're exhausted. When I say people, I mean general people that would vote for Democrats. They're exhausted with kind of this same bad record spinning, whatever that saying is. They're exhausted. I think quite a few people I spoke with, it was less so that they don't support Harris. They're just fed up with the Democratic Party in general, including their local level. I was very surprised when I was in Detroit. Colin, do you have any of those clips from the ladies I spoke with in Detroit? He might be there. He might not.
I missed the last part there.
Do you have the clips with the ladies I spoke with in Detroit?
Yeah, give me 1 sec here.
Because I was
Because if
expecting.
let's say I go out every day, and I talk to 60 people, at least it's like 40 for Trump and a little bit less for Kamala out, Detroit, wherever I am, because a lot of people said that they, like you said, and you said, the Democrats, they say their hands been tied, so we got to untie their hands and we going to do the Republicans now and see what they can do.
Donald Trump happens to win Michigan. What should people know as the reason why?
Because we're so disappointed with the Democrats and their mishandling and misrepresenting. The communities aren't getting better. We're still waiting. There is no reparations for us. Nobody's coming to save us. We've been waiting for a very, very, very long time for bigger and better changes, and we don't see it coming. So if Trump wins, yeah, I would blame the Democrats and their lack of support to the communities and the people, the constituents.
And you feel the bigger and better changes are only happening for wealthier people who can't, because the community here can't afford to live in those high rises.
No, we have a new high rise. They done tore down the Joe Louis Arena to build a high rise for the rent being $10,000 a month. The lowest rent there would be, I think, about $2,500 to $3,000 a month. Right. And that's horrible. Then you got the Hudson building coming up. Nobody's going to be able to afford that downtown on Woodward. So she said build houses. Okay, are they going to build houses that we can afford? Because the houses that they're building here, right over there off of the large freeway, is $600,000. We cannot afford.
That is, to answer your question, that's the sentiment I got pretty much everywhere. And I thought, I don't do pre-interviews, so I just go in. I might have assumptions on who people support. I really thought these were going to be like Kamala stands. It was at a National Action Network rally. That's Al Sharpton's group. And these two are hardcore, lifelong, vote blue no matter who types. They did the volunteering. They knocked on the doors for Democrats for 20 years. And they're considering Trump because they're fed up. So that's kind of a sentiment I got. People are just tired of being told election after election, given, from the Obama lectures of, well, you can't get everything you want right away. And, basically people are tired of incrementalism, even the people that used to preach incrementalism. So that's kind of what I got.
Yeah.
And people
go ahead.
People were already kind of feeling that way in 2020, but I think what put them over the edge was the last few years of the crazy prices.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in some areas, especially poor communities, immigration has been an issue. And I am I was a supporter of abolish ICE. I am pro-migration, but I want the immigration to be humane to the migrants and to the communities that they come into. I want it to be done properly in a way that supports human beings, right? And I live in London, Kentucky. And one of the things that happened here, which is happening across the country, is they did not expand, and Kamala is still not talking about expanding the federal housing programs. So there's a cap on how much federal housing can be built in each state, in each area. One of the problems is that Biden has incentivized housing migrants, which I'm down with. I'm down, bring all the migrants, house them. But part of the problem is in my area, we now have, when we didn't before, 5 to 6 years waiting list. Because of that prioritization, we have dozens of new migrant families, which I'm happy and fine with them being in my area. I have no issue with that. I do have an issue with them not expanding federal housing here, building more federal housing so it can also accommodate. We're one of the poorest states in the country, or one of the poorest counties in the country, literally. I think that we're number 8 on the list of impoverished counties in the country. So if we're going to bring in and you're going to fill up the public housing, prioritizing migrants, there needs to be also housing built to prioritize the locals. And what this ends up doing is creating a gulf between different classes of poor people. right? Where you have poor people that are legitimately frustrated because Biden isn't handling the immigration issue properly because he's not distributing the resources in the right manner. He's placing some of the impacts on the most poor communities. And what that does is that creates an opening, a window, an open door for Trump to walk in and say, okay, we need to deport all these people. And even people that don't support deporting them say, well, we have 4 families in Appalachia living in a trailer together because we can't get any housing assistance right now. And there's a lot more to it, as far as hoarding of homes. You've got landlords hiking up prices, making them unaffordable, housing not being built, apartment complexes not being built. But as far as immigration goes, that is one issue that I think is impacting people and as part of why Trump is resonating. And it's all because he's full of it. He's full of crap. He's inhumane. He believes in white replacement theory. He's dehumanizing to migrants to the extreme. They're eating cats and dogs. Like, what is that? But people do feel the impacts of Biden irresponsibly handling the migration crisis. And when he's putting burden on poor communities, but not giving them the resources that they need to for both the migrant families and for the people that live there, that's a problem. And it has to be addressed. And Kamala Harris still hasn't addressed it, really. Not really.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue to my last topic on another person full of crap. And that would be J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, who, if Trump is elected president, Donald Trump has been on a 40-year diet of cheeseburgers and Diet Cokes. So it's not at all out of the question that J.D. Vance could enter that Oval Office eventually through natural causes for Trump. J.D. Vance was on Joe Rogan. Say what you want about Rogan, who I think did a complete fluffy waste of a time interview with Trump. I get, Rogan, his charm is he doesn't know anything about anything and it's just a conversation. Maybe you shouldn't, try to normalize.
The guy said on Some of the Greatest Minds, literally, I'm talking, he hasn't just interviewed idiots. He's interviewed people like Abby Martin, Norm Finkelstein. He has interviewed people that are fully aware and can accurately talk about things. And he's had hundreds and hundreds of interviews, feigning stupid at this point or feigning that he doesn't know anything. If that's his style of reporting or his style of interviewing, is kind of losing its luster at this point because
it was pretty. I didn't watch the whole thing, but what I watched, it was pretty horrible and weak. But he had J.D. Vance on, and boy, did J.D. Vance lie through his teeth about his role and response to the poisoned people of East Palestine and Pennsylvania. Colin, play the clip. I'll just tell you when to cut out of it.
It's one of the biggest problems with corporate America is socialized costs but privatized profits. Right. And what you really want is that you want major American companies, and I'm a believer in the market economy, you want them to absorb the benefits but also the costs, and that's often what doesn't happen. Like, for example, so I talked about this train disaster in East Palestine, and the railroad companies hate me because I kind of went on a crusade against them afterwards. And what I realized is, think of all the costs of that disaster. Think of the healthcare costs, the welfare costs from people who lost their jobs, the declining home values in that community, just all of the costs absorbed by that community. And the railroads are paying slap-on-the-hand fines. And it sort of occurred to me that the reason they're not more serious about these train disasters is because they're privatizing the rewards. But when a major train disaster happens, who picks up the tab? It's the local residents and it's the American taxpayer. And that's something that fundamentally has to change.
Yeah, that has to change.
You can pull out.
When you're talking about
So, wow. If you knew nothing about this, you might think, wow, this is a sincere guy. Only he didn't go on a crusade against Norfolk Southern. And he, in addition to Sherrod Brown, Democrat, Senator of Ohio, Bob Casey, Pennsylvania Senator, John Fetterman, Senator from Pennsylvania, and the rest of them, they didn't go on a crusade against Norfolk Southern at all. and why J.D. Vance and his bullshit, and I'm not going to knock Rogan because he doesn't do any research, and why would he know any of this? Which is kind of the problem when you have corrupt liars on, and you don't. It's not that he's stupid. He's not a journalist. So why would he know any of this? Why would he be equipped? He makes enough money. He could hire a team of journalists to tell him things in his ear so he could then challenge people. But anyway, J.D. Vance, let's go through the timeline here. In February, Lewis, who did great reporting for us in East Palestine, went up to J.D. Vance in East Palestine. It was the 1-year anniversary after Norfolk Southern unnecessarily chemically nuked the heartland, not just East Palestine, Pennsylvania. That plume went to as many as 8 states, a toxicologist told us. And he confronted him saying, hey, more evidence is coming out that Norfolk Southern did not have to detonate those toxic train cars, that they were warned not to detonate those toxic train cars. Do you think there should be some type of criminal investigation? Let's play that.
Do you think anyone should be held criminally liable for the decision to detonate those cars? A resident I've been speaking with said that they spoke with the former Vice President Al Gore at one point, who thinks that something could be criminal there. But the ultimate decision to detonate the cars seems like it was unnecessary.
Well, the NTSB report is going to come out soon. One thing I'd say, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is it's really important that we not have a federal settlement with Norfolk Southern before the NTSB report. It's like, why would you try to memory hole and prevent discovery on an accident before you even have the accident report?
Right.
Look, we'll see what the NTSB report says. My strong suspicion is there were a lot of mistakes. Whether they're criminal mistakes, I got to see more evidence before I can say that. See you guys.
Thank
you. All right. Said I need more evidence. That was in February. Well, there already was evidence, but all right, give them the benefit of the doubt. I need to see more evidence before I do something like call for criminal investigation against a corporation that pays off all the politicians. Okay, well, in May, the head of the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, testified in front of J.D. Vance. They did their investigation. They provided the report that he just said he needed to see before he was going to call for some type of criminal investigation. Colin, I don't know if we could start and stop this clip, but if we can, play it, and I'll tell you when to stop.
I won't ask you to speak to motivations here, but when you have an unnecessary, uncontrolled burn that poisoned a lot of people, that then led to rapid transit of train traffic, a lot of people, including me, are wondering, did they do this not because it was necessary, but because it allowed them to move traffic and freight more quickly? And if so, that is an extraordinary thing that I think requires a lot of further work from this committee and from others. But we will stop there because I see my time is up. Thank you, Chair Hamady.
May I add?
Interesting. So a lot of people are wondering, did Norfolk Southern blow up unnecessarily 5 cars of over 1 million pounds of toxic cancerous gas over Ohio and Pennsylvania unnecessarily? Well, maybe if we don't know, I don't know, Zeynab, when you don't know something and there's a lot of questions around it, what typically do you have agencies do?
Research, investigate. Well,
ding, ding, ding.
Not our politicians don't have agencies do that, but that's what they should. That's what they should do.
There's something called the Department of Justice. There's something called the Ohio AG, the PA AG. You could criminally investigate.
They could, and they should.
Yes. Let's continue.
May I add something to that?
Please.
Senator, it's even, I would say the factual information in our docket shows that oxyvinyls was on scene and providing information to Norfolk Southern and their contractors.
Oxyvinyls, by the way, is the company that manufactured the vinyl chloride. So the company that made the chemicals, they were on scene after the derailment, advising Norfolk Southern what to do and what not to do.
On the 4th, 5th, and 6th, they informed them that they believed polymerization was not occurring and there was no justification to do a vent and burn. Rightfully, Norfolk Southern's contractors said, ruled out hot tapping and transloading because it would have been a potential safety issue for their employees. But there was another option. Let it cool down. It was cooling down. We know for a fact that when that pressure relief device went off, that it had to have been above 185 degrees. Later, much later, over the course of 22 hours, that tank car was cooling, not to mention the other 4 tank cars that were only between 64 and 69 degrees. So Oxyvinyls was on scene providing information to Norfolk Southern's contractor, who was in the room when the decision was made, and when advice was given to the governor of Ohio, to the incident commander. They were not given full information because no one was told Oxyvinyl was on scene. They were left out of the room. The incident commander didn't even know they existed. Neither did the governor. So they were provided incomplete information to make a decision.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Vance.
Oh, your mic.
My line of questioning, I just want to be clear here, is not a criticism of the incident commander or of the governor. I think it's a criticism of the people on the ground who provided inadequate information. And provided inadequate information, I think, to the great detriment of the community on the ground. This is extraordinary work by your team, but this is a really, really troubling set of circumstances. This town very well may have been poisoned to facilitate the rapid movement of freight, or at the very least, it was poisoned for reasons that we can't identify. That should really concern every single person on this committee.
I don't know, Zeynab. He said he needed to wait for the report. I need to wait for the NTSB's findings before we could do something as drastic as call for criminal charges. Well, here's the NTSB report and the chairwoman saying the cars were cooling down. Norfolk Southern ignored that. The owner of the chemical company had warned them 3 times, by the way. There's no risk of an uncontrolled explosion. Just let the cars cool, which would have taken more time. Norfolk Southern didn't want to do that because every day that they didn't reopen the rail line was over $1 million they were going to lose. Number 3, it's not that they provided inadequate information. That seems kind of like, oh, you made a mistake. Norfolk Southern hid from the governor of Ohio when they were advising him to sign off on blowing up these cars, hid that, oh, the temperature of the cars are cooling, hid that the owner of the chemical cars are telling us we don't need to do this. Basically, they intentionally made this area a sacrifice zone so that they could reopen the train lines quicker. And we know that they did this on purpose because they were burying contaminated soil right after they reopened the train lines. And don't take it from me, J.D. Vance literally just said, it sure seems like this town might have been poisoned to move freight faster. Okay. So after all that, I don't know, maybe I'm naive, Zeynab. I reached out to his office, not once, not twice, several times. And I said, based on his words to Lewis in February, he needed to see the report. He needed to see their findings. Is it going to call for, I didn't even ask for criminal charges. I said, are you going to call for a criminal investigation into Norfolk Southern's actions?
Well, did they answer you? Nothing. So he did.
Sherrod Brown did respond. Sherrod Brown did respond. Sherrod Brown responded with, some crocodile tears and how outraged he was, but wouldn't answer about a criminal investigation. Neither would Fetterman. Neither would Bob Casey, who's up for re-election. Notice the thing here? And when, by the way, I reached out to J.D. Vance, he was prostituting himself at the time to try and be selected as Trump's VP. So I don't think at that point calling for criminal charges against Norfolk Southern. And by the way, let's be clear. If you were going to do something like call for criminal charges against Norfolk Southern, who are 2 of the largest shareholders of Norfolk Southern? That would be Vanguard and BlackRock. So let's be clear. You're not just going after Norfolk Southern. You're going after the people who run America, which is BlackRock, the Vanguard, etc. So I don't want to hear this fucking.
That's why ignoring East Palestine is a bipartisan effort.
Right. So I really don't want to hear this man who goes on Joe Rogan and, acting as a populist. He's a fucking liar. I've spoken with the people of East Palestine who have told me he showed up for 5 minutes in the beginning, looked around in the creeks. His office stopped responding to them, or they were responding with, platitudes, but he has been nowhere to be found. The very, very, the least he could do is say, you know what, we need to have a criminal referral to the Ohio Department of Justice to look into the timeline of who did what, when, and why. Why, what was the science? What was Norfolk Southern being told? Who were the officials involved? What was the basis? There are laws, there are charges like, something recklessness. Even if you don't feel there's enough criminal charges of intentional criminal negligence.
Yes, I was going to say negligence. Negligence could be a potential liability if it wasn't intentional.
Right, and I think it was intentional because literally, it's not just the NTSB. The owner of the chemical cars testified last year that they advised Norfolk Southern three before they detonated those cars that there was no risk of an uncontrolled explosion and that you didn't need to do this. So it sure seems, the bottom line is, if you are the senator of Ohio, these are your people, even though it affects more than Ohio. And if you are getting the information that you said, I need more evidence, I need more information, and you're given it, not just by the NTSB, but by other sources. And more importantly, if you actually go there and talk to the people, I was just there for my second time. We have been there my third time. We have been there overall 8 times. Lewis was there 5. I've been there 3. This is a disaster zone. People are sick. There are 8-year-old girls getting puberty now, having menstrual cycles. There are boys age 6, 7, and 8 developing hair as if they're 15-year-old boys. There are men getting double breast cancer. There are people, women, in their 40s having periods that are extending in 2-3 months. There are strokes. People are having strokes, seizures, full body tingling, not to mention the cognitive issues, memory, problems focusing. I think they came up with a list of almost 100 symptoms. People urinating blood, people pooping blood. And this guy goes on Joe Rogan and says, I was a crusader against Norfolk Southern. Are you kidding? And that's the problem with our media, Zeynab. We don't have any investigative journalism anymore. And I will brag at this point for Status Coup. Who else is going back there 8 times? Who else is even covering it anymore? No one. No one.
And that people always say Republicans are, Democrats are the party of rhetoric and Republicans are the party of substance. No, they're not. Their rhetoric is just different. There's no substance there. And I think this is a great example of that because everything JD Vance has done has been political theater so far. But when it comes to anything substantive, he's not. He's not done anything substantive. And you know why they're not? Is because, and yeah, Punch Up Pot, I agree, it is deeply sad. And why I believe that he is doing this, and obviously, is if there is criminal liability, then that opens up a fissure for the victims of this to be able to then get civil litigation so that they can get actual health care, so that they can get housing, so that they can relocate somewhere else for those that can't afford it. And so rather than Norfolk Southern doing what they're supposed to, and they haven't, as far as the responsibility goes of helping out the people in this region, they haven't done this. But also the federal case isn't being, in my belief, is that the federal case isn't being sought after because it would then legitimize a potential massive civil liability case.
I think it's that. I also think it's as simple as he thought, or he was being told, hey, you might be on the short list for vice president. Don't rock the boat with corporate America right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's part of it too.
I think it's very simple. Don't, there's a lot. I mean, the Ohio governor got a lot of money from Norfolk Southern. A lot of politicians got a lot of money from Norfolk Southern. And don't rock the boat, JD. You're on the short list. Not even that Trump would care either way. I mean, Trump was saying he was going to go after Goldman Sachs in 2016, which was a joke. But at the end of the day, if you can be a senator for this community and the people are sick, and you basically not only look the other way, but have the gall to go on the biggest show in America and act like you've been a crusader for the people. I mean, that is just a joke. And unfortunately, to the 11 million or however many people listen to him, because Joe Rogan, I'm not even knocking him on this. He's not a journalist. Why would he know any of this? If only Joe Rogan had, I don't know, a journalist on who's been there 3 times, or a journalist that's been to Flint 21 times. I don't know.
Or
but
someone on his massive staff is the #1 talk show in the world could have just a staff member that can Google things before asking about them.
Because he's not equipped to challenge, because he doesn't know enough. Not because he's stupid, but because he's not a journalist. He doesn't know any of this stuff. So it's easy to be railroaded and just spun by politicians and other people. It doesn't mean some of the interviews he does with more cultural figures or pop culture can't be good. But, to just give open platforms to people to just lie and basically be able to false advertise that they're like with the people and on the side of the people, it's disgusting. Because honestly,
what's sad, Jordan? Sometimes he gives more pushback to individuals than we see on mainstream media. The bare minimum that he does is honestly sometimes and a lot of times more than what we'll see on mainstream media. Even if he doesn't necessarily believe what he's asking them, he'll just ask like the counter argument sometimes, and that ends up creating a pushback that we've never seen in mainstream media with some of these people that he brings on. And it's fascinating to me. He had some, I think with RFK Jr., he pushed back asking about Israel. I hadn't seen any mainstream media folks interviewing RFK Jr., asking them about Israel while he was running. That's just one example, but that's how far even our, mainstream media has gone from journalism.
Right. It's so sad. All right. Zeynab, tell the people where they can find you. You have your own Substack.
Yeah. Bullhorn Bulletin, Substack. So that would be BULLHORN BULLETIN. And I had planned on launching mid-October, but unfortunately my mother passed. She got sick, very ill in the last few months, and then she passed away, and it has continued to push back my due date. My computer crashed too when I was in the middle of all of this. It just died. So I had to go get a new computer. I was like, oh my gosh, everything's happening all at once. But I was set to launch, but I will be putting stuff out this weekend. I have an interview with Chuck Modi. I have an interview with Gadfly Pod, Dustin from Gadfly Pod. So I'm very excited about that. And you can also find me at ZEYNABDAY on Twitter. And you can find me at Zeynab Day on YouTube, or you can look up Bullhorn Bulletin. I think that'll pull up YouTube as well. Absolutely. And occasionally, once in a blue moon, you can find me on here too.
We'll make it more than once in a blue moon. And we might be busy if there's going to be another Stop the Steal 2.0 or
true.
Or worse, who knows? Because Trump's already.
Jordan, it's coming to a point where Lydia's almost old enough where I can get back out on the ground again.
Look at that. I do need help.
I might have to put my reporter pants back on.
There you go. Sometimes I don't even have pants on. People just don't know. All right, Jeff. Super chats. Jeff, $5. I have faith we will see 135 likes. We did get to 135, I believe. Thank you, Jeff. International Party of Antarctica. Lovely. I've always wanted to visit. $5. Appreciate it. Jay Denny, $2 super chat. I'm poor. We appreciate any amount. Thank you. CB, thanks again. 20 memberships gifted. Holy cow. Thank you. That's very, very kind and very, very needed and appreciated. Kimmy, $4.99. Jordan and Zeynab, love it. Thank you so much for your analysis. Thank you. International Party of Antarctica, $5. Trump and Elon planning to use Starlink, weaponized holograms, and voice tech to implement a Project Bluebeam National Jonestown type of event. All I know is Elon Musk is blatantly violating election law. Like, there is no gray area. It's very clear he's breaking the law with this lottery shit. Somehow,
you can't pay people. Thank you, Jordan. Oh my gosh, I've been looking at this going,
no.
How is the FEC not shut him down already?
Somehow, like, he was supposed to go before a judge and that got kicked down the can. I'm sure he will never, he probably won't even go to a case because he's the richest man on earth. But I don't know. Pretty soon you'll be able to offer men, other things to vote. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. International Party of Antarctica, $2. Two deplorables, more like a dumpster of diabolicals. Yeah, they need to put Biden, back in the basement. He's not helping with his calling everyone garbage. Ken gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much, Ken. I very much appreciate this. And by the way, this is really helpful because for those of you in a position where you could purchase, 10 to 20 memberships that go to other people. There's a lot of people that email me, Jordan, I want to support, but I'm broke. I can't. So you're helping people that want to support us financially, but aren't in a position to do so by you gifting those memberships. So if you're in the position to do it, thank you for paying it forward to help support our reporting. Teresa, 273, $10. More Zeynab shows Jordan. Hey, I asked her yesterday, but she was out trick-or-treating. So there you go.
I had mom duty yesterday.
There you go. So we'll definitely oblige, have you back on. Thank you, everybody. A reminder, we are going to be
One thing I just wanted to say, Lateef said that Kim Brown speaks very highly of Status Coup, of the on-ground reporting that she does, and you and I just wanted to give a shout out and a thanks to Kim Brown for shouting you out on her show quite often, and I think that's awesome. Or Status Coup.
Also a friend of the coup. Kim Brown does great work. Burn It Down. Subscribe. Burn It Down with Kim Brown.
Burn It Down with Kim Brown. She's awesome.
Reminder, Tuesday, I'll be in Pennsylvania. Tina will be in Nevada. So 2 critical swing states. I don't know where I'm going to be. Somewhere in Pennsylvania. Tina will be probably in Vegas. But these are very important. One or both could potentially, based on the Electoral College math, could help decide who wins or not. I don't know if the election's going to be called on election night. I doubt it. But we're not going to just sit in our studio bloviating. We will be out on the ground covering whatever chaos is going on. It costs money. So please support us. If you're already a member, we appreciate donations to help fund this. I got to pay Tina. I got to pay her cameraman. Got to pay John. Hotels, travel. It costs a lot of money, and we don't have any corporate money from the banks, the fossil fuckers, big pharma, big real estate, Silicon Valley, or the military industrial complex. Thank you for watching. We'll have some content.